I'm reading Fred Hoyle's The Black Cloud, and I haven't finished the book yet. I still want to introduce the first episode. I'm going to have several episodes about this book because it's really a seminal work of science fiction, and I think just very interesting also for the purposes of Orange Capital Partners. Today I want to talk about one specific scene in the book. It's when the Earthlings communicate with an intelligence, and I think the genius of Hoyle in this particular scene is he's using a conversation between Earthlings and an outer space intelligence to reflect on us and just give us some really interesting insight. For example, the intelligence says that, well, given the way you guys evolved, you have a physical representation on the planet in terms of a body, and that gives you limits in terms of how much energy you can use and how big you can be and how much, in particular, energy you can use for computational purposes because of gravity. And there is better ways to be, let's say, if you were in gaseous form, you would not be subject to gravity, so you could use more energy for computation. I think those are interesting thoughts. Again, I'm going to have several episodes and a formal review of the book, but this I think goes into the concept of computation, which I think we identified Orange Capital Partners several times as being the crucial sort of aspect in wealth generation. And I think it's a crucial aspect in any kind of evolution. This is a Not Even Wrong podcast. It's September 17, 2021. This is Crim Delco. Since the last update, we're up 1%. The market's down 90 basis points. For the year, we're up 14.4%. The market's up 18.8%. We're underperforming by 4.4%. Just before I go to the Fred Hoyle conversation, just want to mention that we had an interesting reversal yesterday on the biotech index in particular. We were down, let's say, 1.5% during the day, driven by stocks like Twist and Intelia and Crispr. And then they rebound towards the end of the day, and we ended up 1% up for the day in the fund. There's no specific news. I think the biotech index is, of course, driven by probably three major factors. One is certain data that comes out from these companies. We expect big data coming next week. I don't mean big data in terms of volume, but important data from Editas. And then we have, of course, other data points. But I think interesting also, on Thursday, the chief science officer of Intelia gave a webinar in the Crispr journal network. And I think those are the kinds of events that we're starting to see more and more. Of course, we at Orange Capital Partners have been paying attention to these events for a while now. And I just want to mention the purpose of this podcast is to give people a sense for what it feels like to run a hedge fund. So this is a good example of you start investing in a space and you almost feel like you're a renegade here. Nobody cares about what you're doing. You have to explain to people what it is and all that. And then slowly but surely it starts becoming more popular. And at the end, let's say a webinar like this, still not very well attended, probably a few scientists, maybe you would have maybe somebody like ARK Invest, maybe sending an analyst to attend, but that's about it. I mean, this is not a big Wall Street show. And then all of a sudden it flips. There's almost like a phase change where it becomes very popular. We're not there yet with CRISPR. We believe we will get there because once these companies start developing drugs that really work and start changing the landscape in the medical space, we believe that there is definitely a huge potential for this type of technology. Of course, there's also the risk. We have to be very conscious of side effects, always a risk in medicine, but we hope that is mitigatable. So let's get back to the conversation about Fred Hoyle. So in the book, there is a scene where the black cloud has covered Earth and is making life on Earth very difficult. And then one of the scientists finds out that there is a certain pattern in the way Earth terrestrial communication is being interrupted by the cloud, and then he conjectures that maybe the cloud is communicating with us in terms of these patterns. So what we do then is we start uploading, let's say, books and things like that up to the cloud, through the same technology, but we're not really uploading anything up there, but we're sending signals at a wavelength that we think the cloud understands, and we basically make the cloud, assume the cloud is also, we, meaning the terrestrials, they assume the cloud is a lot more intelligent than us. So instead of us learning the language of the cloud, they probably are much faster in learning our language, and that happens. And then after a while, they start sending books and books and books and things like that, music and art and all that stuff through radio signals, and the cloud picks it up and then learns our language and is at some point able to communicate with us. So this is sort of the gist of this particular scene. And what I found so genius about Fred Hoyle is how the cloud then talks about, let's say, there's a question by one of the scientists, so what are your thoughts about us? And how are we different than you? And then the cloud gives a certain sort of repertoire of, okay, you're this, you're that, you're different than me in this and that term. And I thought that was genius by Fred Hoyle. That in itself, this self-reflection by having almost a self-interview, or in this case, a virtual interview with a virtual artificial intelligence. But of course, it's a self-interview by Fred Hoyle, and he's trying to signal, okay, this is who we are. And there's two things that I think that shine a light to me. One is, he just says, you guys are confined by the way you evolved, by the fact that you are a physical representation. You have a body and you walk around on the planet, on a physical planet. You are subject to gravity, and that gives you a lot of that holds you back in many ways. And the one way it holds you back the most is, and this is the second thing which I found so interesting, it is the fact that you're limited in the use of energy. So the amount of energy you can use in terms of computation, for example, is just limited because you have gravity to deal with. You have a whole body which is very inefficient to deal with, and because of that also, let's say, he says one interesting thing, which is that in the evolution of your species, so now we're talking about, again, the artificial intelligence talking to the earthlings, in the evolution of your species, bones and muscle were so much more important because you had to overcome gravity. And it took a long time for bones and muscle to be replaced by intelligence, which is, of course, which is true. I mean, you know, look at the evolution of mankind. Strong men were in high demand for a long time. The firstborn son, and then everybody wanted to have sons and all that because of strength, because of more safety in terms of just muscle and bone, and that was replaced by intelligence, and we're in that process right now. And of course, what this cloud is alluding to is that we're still nowhere near the kind of intelligence that we could have if we weren't muscle and bone. And of course, this opens up many avenues. Okay, one of the avenues is, let's say, what Lex Friedman's always dreaming about is this sort of idea that we can totally merge into the multiverse, or whatever you want to call it, and have an identity in digital form. So we don't want to be bound by our body. We just want to be bound by our ability for computation. Now, of course, that in itself opens up all new kinds of avenues, again, for evolution, because even if you subtract the body from the mind, which is of course very difficult, but this just for sake of argument, let's do that. There's also fitter and less fitter non-embodied intelligence. So people, let's say, are able to learn faster than others. People are able to take failure easier than others. There's emotional issues and all that kind of stuff, which of course, again, is probably tied to the body anyway. So if you had an intelligence which is separate from the body, then that intelligence would probably also evolve in many different ways and be bound by certain things, maybe by the ability to, maybe by the ability to evolve faster or less fast, in terms of, like, is this, let's say, can I make mistakes? How fast can I make mistakes versus I can't make mistakes? I just read excuse me for the digression here, but a very interesting article about the evolution of cells. And the cell communication, the cell circuitry within human cells or mammal cells. And the conclusion is in Quantum Magazine, by the way. The conclusion is that the pathway, the information pathway within cells is not very straightforward. It is a lot more like a neural net where information goes from one layer to the other and then throughout the system defines the function of certain layers of the network, and then those functions get executed. So in other words, there's a lot more complexity and a lot more adaptability and a lot more ability to also change towards the environment, which is really key for cell development as much as it is for humans or any kind of intelligence to evolve. Adaptability, try and error, Popperianism, it's all there. It's all in. If you look at the pathways of cells, if you look at businesses, evolution of economics, wealth generation, if you look at the evolution of ideas. So to come back to Fred Hoyle's conversation with the extraterrestrials, yes, our body might be confining us, but it doesn't mean that if we are not confined by a body, that the intelligence would not be confined by other things, because again, adaptability is a lot more important than the actual substrate in which you are. But having said that, let's get back to the conversation. I just thought it was so interesting the way Hoyle sort of formulates this dialogue. Hoyle himself has made himself a name by developing the theory of nucleosynthesis, so basically how hydrogen formed into helium, created stars, and then from there we went and created other elements and therefore what we see today on Earth and things like that. So he of course has a big interest in those kinds of questions, and he again uses this dialogue between the black cloud and the terrestrials to have sort of a to think about this and give us a sort of mirror image of what he thinks. For example, he was not a proponent of the Big Bang. I don't know exactly what he was a proponent of. I don't myself actually believe this Big Bang story doesn't make a lot of sense to me either. It's just weird because where's the Big Bang coming from? Why did that happen? So anyway, I'm not a big fan of it, but let's not go there now. Let's just stay with Fred Hoyle. And to summarize this particular episode, just again, I thought it was an interesting conversation that the terrestrials have with the intelligence. And it just shows that we're really confined by our bodies, by gravity. And there are other forms of intelligence that would open up ourselves to maybe much higher use of energy, because energy is necessary for computation. Now, why is energy necessary for computation? Actually, that's a good question. Why is there a relationship, a linear relationship, or even exponential or whatever? But the more energy we have, the more computation we can do. Why is computation necessary? Why is energy necessary for computation? This is an interesting question. What is energy? Energy is sort of an ability to do work, and computation is work. Computation is iteration. Computation is really, in the end, is failing, or it's trying and trying and trying until you find the right answer. So no matter how you slice it and dice it, I think energy and computation, this is an interesting question that I want to think about a little bit more. I don't have the answer right now, but why do we need more energy to do computation? Or is there a way to do more efficient computation with less energy? Of course there is. That's called algorithmic thinking. So we can have algorithms that can do the same thing with less energy. So those are the kinds of questions I think we should be asking ourselves, and particularly in the area now where we think self-learning through the ability to create realistic video animation, those sort of things will become crucial in wealth generation in the next 20 years. So thinking about how efficiently to use energy and therefore use computation for the purposes of creating an animated video landscape in which then, let's say, cars can learn how to drive and many other things can learn how to exist in this world through self-learning. Again, self-learning, the key. Self-learning, build networks, build systems that are adaptable, that can expose themselves to the environment, either real or virtual, and then learn how to behave in the environment. This will be the key of wealth generation going forward. And the use of energy, the efficient use of energy, will allow that. And I think we already see where this is going. Let's say if we could replace, actually one of the things that Fred Hoyle says in this dialogue also, which I think is very interesting, he says that basically you Earthlings are using very inefficiently, you're using the energy of the sun. There's much better ways to use it. And this, of course, is something very dear to our heart with Tesla, for example. So thank you.